So good morning and welcome. And I came down from Toronto yesterday where we have 3 feet of snow and it's minus 20. Thought, oh good, I'm coming down, it'll be in the 50s here, and I hear tomorrow you're getting a snowstorm, so can't win. So Doris was setting up a little bit of my background. I spent 15 years in the classroom. Now I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Toronto in the Faculty of Education. You can see the other hat I wear is a senior consultant with the Critical Thinking Consortium, and our work is with schools across North America and internationally on trying to find ways to embed critical thinking in the work teachers do from kindergarten through graduate school. So Thursday I was in Maryland working with Title I schools at the elementary level, and how do we infuse critical thinking in the Title I schools to increase student achievement. And I flew home yesterday so I could go out and visit my students who are practice teaching, and then flew out last night. So it's a bit of a whirlwind. But we're going to explore some of these pieces, and there's a couple of key questions I want to look at. In an hour and a half will be fairly quick, but I hope to touch on 2 things. One is I want to look at the intersections. You know, notice I don't come from a design background, I come from a critical thinking, creativity background, but I want to look at the intersection between design thinking, critical thinking, and creativity. Partly I'm helped by the fact that I have one of my children is a chef, my daughter is a ballet dancer, and my other son's a mechanic, so they certainly keep those pieces in line. The other piece I wanted to make a case, and I heard this in some opening remarks, I think the work you're doing is what needs to be in every classroom. Like, I think one of the mistakes we sometimes make is we make design learning this separate piece, or what happens in some classes, and I'd like to suggest to you it should be what's in an English class, in a social studies class, in a science class, that it is just the way learning needs to be happening, as opposed to another side of learning. I find some of the richest things, I'll just a quick personal example. You know, when my son was in high school and he's apprenticing to be a mechanic, his academic classes did not do the kind of rich thinking he would walk down the hall and do when he was working in the trades areas. Like I saw the kind of innovation and creativity did over here, but over here it was kind of stripped out. And it seems to me that what we're here to talk about today is what we need to be doing in every class. So this is a question I guess I want us to think a little bit about. Where should we be heading in education? What are the directions? And I've always liked this quote from Alice in Wonderland when Alice falls down the rabbit hole and she asks, you know, would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here? And the rabbit says, well, that depends a good deal on where you want to get to. Well, I don't care where. Then it doesn't matter which way you go. I sometimes feel like we kind of do that in education at times. You know, I had a school a year ago contact me and they said, we're putting iPads on all our grade 6 students' hands. Can you tell us what apps we should put on? And I said, well, do you know why you're putting iPads in your school? Like, it felt to me they'd just fallen down the rabbit hole. You know, here we're putting iPads in every kid's hand. Why? By the way, I love the iPads. I think they have wonderful potential. But did you think about where you're trying to take learning, or did you think about we have to put this technology in our kids' hands? By the way, when eventually I said to them, I can't tell you which apps, there are thousands, but I'll tell you how I would organize my apps. And if I showed you my iPad, my apps are clustered around inquiry inputs. If you need to find information to help solve a problem, here are the apps that I use to access information. Then I've got a cluster of inquiry processing. If you want to share, kick around ideas, organize, process what you found, these are apps that would be helpful. And then I have inquiry outputs. Now that you've thought about, gathered, found your information, and you want to create something, here are the apps I'd use to create once I've gone through that process. But you know, to me it was more about how are you organizing the learning tools. There are thousands of apps we can pick from. So I wanted just to explore, and just to have a bit of a context, take a look at this graph, and it's even 10 years out of date. The economy-wide measures of, you know, what does the economy need? I don't think you'll be surprised to see the red line, non-routine manual, in decline. But take a look, even the yellow line, which is routine cognitive, in decline. Memorizing formulas, routine cognitive tasks, in decline. Kids simply memorizing formulas is not what's needed. Look what's taking off. Non-routine interactive, the ability to collaborate. Think what's going to happen this afternoon. Put your heads together to solve a problem. And the other line really taking off there, non-routine analytic, problem solving, in non-routine, unique situations. So what is it we need going forward? Not memorizing algorithms, not memorizing information to be fed back. I was traveling through the airport in Dubai, I guess a month ago, and at the security check, there's a kind of a cutout of an Arab fellow standing there, and he's animated, you know, so he's taking things out of his bag and telling you what you can take in your carry-on and not, right? And there's a little camera, a little projection behind, so it animates this cutout figure. And I'm watching it going, because my students at the faculty are often saying, well, what if I don't know my content? And I say to them, well, if content delivery is your main goal, we can replace you real quick. Because Siri on my phone can answer that. If it's content you're worried about. And I saw this guy in Dubai, this cutout, and thought, if content delivery is our main goal, we could just put those guys in every classroom. They'll deliver content. What we need to do in teaching, how are we helping kids to think, to solve problems, to innovate, to collaborate? I just pulled a couple of examples. The OECD website, for example, said educational success is no longer about reproducing content knowledge, but it's extrapolating and applying knowledge to novel situations. So when you look at, I mean, around the world this conversation's happening, that simply knowing stuff isn't sufficient in a digital world. Just to carry on from the OECD website, they go on to say education today is much more about ways of thinking, about critical and creative problem solving, decision making, collaboration. Note some of those key words, that this is what education needs to be about in a 21st century context. And by the way, I'm sure what I have up there isn't new to anyone, because we're all having these conversations. It doesn't matter where I thinking, was it 3 weeks ago, I was in Vancouver at a school. They're looking at innovative design options, and very similar conversations to what you're talking about here. This is what I'm finding. And by the way, I've read many states, many jurisdictions, provinces, countries. Everybody has statements on 21st century learning. Would that be a fair statement to make? I mean, everyone's issuing these statements on 21st century learning. When I've read through them, if I try to distill down, so what is everybody saying? At its core, here's what people are talking about. 21st century learning needs to be inquiry-based. It's less about looking up, it's about inquiring into. The focus is on rigorous thinking about the curriculum, but note it's not just reactive, but it's imaginative and productive. It's kids taking the curriculum, thinking deeply about it, and thinking in ways that are imaginative and productive. And the other piece, that it's not in isolation. So what I love that's happening today is kids are solving problems, putting their heads together, not isolating each other, but how do we work together? And let me just show you, these are the 7, and it doesn't matter where I read, you'll see 10, 15, 20, people are talking about competencies these days. These are the 7 competencies that I see coming up repeatedly. These are the things that, doesn't matter whose statement, you'll probably find this. We need children who are critical, creative, and collaborative thinkers. Those 3, we call those in the work I've been doing C3 inquiry. We need inquiry that's critical, creative, and collaborative. That seems to be at the core of lots of conversations. We need kids who are good communicators, but not necessarily in essay form, but in multiple mediums. That the world today is much different than do you write an essay, what are the different mediums they communicate in. Children who are global thinkers. Just pause on that for a moment. I've been working with a woman up in Ontario who's launching, if you get a chance, take a look, Worldviews. One word, but the last part of the word is V-U-Z-E, Worldviews. She's creating a website for kids K to 12 who go onto the website and they post questions. And children around the world who are on Worldviews respond to the questions. So it gets kids posting questions to other kids and kids responding to those questions. And her pilot that's running right now has schools in Tanzania, in Israel, in Latin America, in Canada, and kids are going online and they're asking questions. One group asked, they're studying about water, and the assumption being made in North America is that in Tanzania, the biggest challenge for families in Tanzania is finding clean water. So they posted questions about this, and the kids in Tanzania posted back, well, actually, it's the wild animals that I'm more worried about than the water. When I go to get the water, it's the wild animals that are, how do we control that? So, kids are talking with kids. What do you think about this issue that's going on? So how do we use technology to engage children in more conversations? Are they self-regulated in their learning? So I want to distinguish just for a moment, self-directed learners get to pick what they're interested in, how they like to show it. But self-regulated learners were able to say, I need more information, I think I'm on the right track. They're able to decide, who do I need to get to help me with this? They're able to monitor their own learning. And finally, when we talk about children who are digitally literate, again, it doesn't mean I know the latest app. But do I know when to use it, when not to use it, how to use it well? The digital literacy comes with much more than just being aware of the latest. So I want to just build off of this framework. When I was in Dubai, I was actually working in Oman, but we spent a few days in Dubai, and I was struck, first of all, I was struck by Dubai. Like, what a surreal place. Every building there just has, takes your breath away. And, down a couple of blocks from where we were staying, one of the towers, I don't know if you've seen it, but every floor rotates individually. Right? So when you buy a condo in that building, it has you keep. I would just hate to have too much to drink and then go to sleep in that building. Like you'd wake up the next morning saying, I don't remember coming in here. Really interesting place. Saw this billboard. Money built the buildings, imagination created the skyline. And that really resonated with me because the sense I had in Dubai, if you can imagine it, someone will figure out how to build it. There just doesn't seem to be, well, that can't be done. It just seems to have a, we'll figure out a way. Bizarre thing though, we went to the Dubai Mall, walk in, there's this huge aquarium. Like people scuba dive in this aquarium, right? But then I go to the back, and there's a ski hill. And you see all these little Arab kids in the desert in their snowsuits going in to ski. We did not pay to go in there. I just left Toronto. There's no way I wanted to see more snow. So, moving on from that, I want to just play a 2-minute clip that I think feeds nice in from John Seely Brown, from a keynote he delivered that I thought was interesting when he talked about entrepreneurial learners. How do we create entrepreneurial learners? I want you to listen to this 2 minutes, and I want you to listen for what resonates, what you might agree with, disagree with, find provocative. Just listen to John Seely Brown as he talks about creating entrepreneurial learners. I'm going to stop there. By the way, the two heroes he will mention in the next couple of minutes are John Dewey and Maria Montessori. And he'll go on to say that perhaps they were 75 years ahead of their time, that they had the right ideas, perhaps not the right tools, and that now we have the tools to implement the vision. Could you just take a couple of minutes and share some thoughts with someone around you? What from that clip resonated? Maybe you found provocative, maybe you disagreed with, agreed with. Just take a couple of minutes. What from that clip jumped out at you? All right, I'm going to bring us back together. And could I ask, just if you would just shout out or share one or two things that resonated with you. Again, you may have disagreed, agreed. What jumped out at you? Who's willing to share something? Thank you.
I like the in the flow idea. Was talking about science and how truly making an invention or something is really all I value to this day in my own memory of the classes I took. So, and how much more I've probably got involved and developed the project and hunted for prototypes.
Yeah. I thought that that idea of being in the flow as opposed to being above it. And, by the way, you heard my background in social studies, which I think is one of the most dangerous subjects for learning about it, but not actually doing the subject, but learning about the subject, right? By the way, in a research survey done with high school students here in the United States around student engagement, history came in at the very bottom of all subjects as the least engaging class. And one of the reasons they don't see the relevance, and they're passively receiving too much information. Imagine if you link design planning where they were creating the story, and I could link many things that you people are doing, from the art to the theater to all kinds of stuff to bring that history to life, but they tend to have it imposed. Tell me another thing that resonated for you. Thank you.
I really liked the half-life of the skill for 5 years. Just kind of with design, especially I teach design, just having to always stay, new technology changes or comes up, so it's like so true. You have to continually learn and be learning and do professional development, because what I'm teaching my students now isn't going to be what I'm teaching them in 5 years.
Yeah, about 2 years ago, Microsoft asked me if I could create a series of lessons around using Xbox Connect in the classroom to promote thinking. So I said, sure, you have to give me an Xbox because I don't have one. So they gave me an Xbox, and I hired my son at $20 an hour to play video games, and I took notes. And has anyone used Xbox Connect? Because to launch it, you have to get your hand to line up. I wasn't very good at that part. My son launched it just like that. But I watch it thinking, in a couple of years, that'll be old technology. We'll be on to something else, right? So am I investing a lot of time? And by the way, much of the conversation these days is moving away from isolated skills to developing competencies in learners. Competencies are clusters of skills in a related context. That if I'm competent, I can adjust on the fly. If I learn a particular skill and it's outdated, I got to go back and learn another skill. So we need competent thinkers, competent communicators who can adjust on the fly. Yeah, one.
I have a question to ask. So,
Right.
I'm sort of older. And in the 60s, I took macro and microeconomics. And this is what I didn't get about this, because back in the 60s, I learned when you change the coefficient on a line, it pivots and it becomes steeper or flatter, which I have continued to use throughout all my decades. I don't agree with all things have a shelf life of 5 years. I think there's some real fundamental things. What I learned about how to pivot a graph, how to make the graph shift up and down, and not just mathematically speaking, but I learned it in the context of econometrics. So, when you think about why is the economy doing what it's doing, my professors taught me to see that phenomena in the context of what a line is doing. I get that, but I still use that, and now I'm a middle school teacher teaching speed and distance and time, and those skills that I learned a billion years ago in econometrics are still incredibly relevant, and they don't have a shelf life of 5 years. So while, like the old-fashioned green bar, remember we did punch cards? Probably some of you remember punch cards. We did punch cards and we ran programs and got green bar out the next morning. Now I have an app. I agree that knowing how to do the green bar and the punch cards had a short shelf life.
Yes, yes.
But the math didn't.
Yeah, this is a very nice distinction. Yeah, note what are those central concepts, big ideas that we need. Like if I go back to our history context, look, there are particular events. I don't care what you said, this battle or that battle. I do care that you have a conceptual understanding of things that are more transcendent. What are those ideas? And I think you're absolutely right. If I don't have some foundational knowledge and concepts, I can't do your subject. But we have to be careful which of these are central, which of these are my little idiosyncratic things I like. So I think that's a very good caution. I also want to add to that, by the way, if you'll encounter colleagues who will say, but I still have to deal with the testing. I want you to know, this is Robert Sternberg's research found, kids who learn in a critically thoughtful way remember content better. See, the myth we have is if there's going to be a content exam at the end, then I should teach transmissively, because we think that content recall, you flow from content delivery in a transmissive model to a content test. Flawed assumption. Children are more likely to remember information they learned when they were engaged in thinking about it. So the key thing is we need kids actively involved in the thinking if you want them to do better on even recall tests. So when I hear that, but this doesn't line up for my state assessment, and I said, well, if your state assessment's content-based, my kids will still outperform if they've had to think about it because they're more likely to remember. We store things better.
It's not one or the other. It's not
Exactly.
just the content. It's not just,
Yeah.
that the content's used as a vehicle for the thought process.
Absolutely. So I want to just build off of this for a little bit. I'm going to challenge Bloom's taxonomy, which is a bit of heresy, I think, in education. Certainly in the faculty I teach at, I'm probably the only one saying this. How many of you learned Bloom's taxonomy in your teacher training? How many of you are invited to question it? See, this is very common. I get almost 100%, oh yeah, we learned about it. I usually get most 5% of people who actually question it. By the way, let me be fair to Benjamin Bloom. When Bloom created his taxonomy, it was a typology of assessment outcomes. In other words, when you create your test bank, when you create your assessment questions or tasks, you need to understand what they're doing. If you frame it this way, you're going to get recall. If you frame it this way, that's an analytical question. That's a synthesis question. That's an evaluative question. We need to understand what our test questions are doing so we can properly assess. We've tended to pick up Bloom's taxonomy as a pedagogical framework. And that means that we feel the need that we first have to teach content to kids, and we move up the hierarchy. Okay? We move from imparting content to working on understanding. And by the way, know what sits at the top, and you should be very concerned about this, because only when you make it to the top are you invited to create. But in Bloom's taxonomy, it's at the top, and by the way, it has been used as, I can show you in our curriculum in Ontario, where we have our academic stream versus our less academic stream. Guess what we strip out of the less academic stream, that top piece? We call it high order thinking, and we presume some kids can't do it. Well, then they can't be involved in your design challenge, because guess what's at the top of the hierarchy. I want to suggest to you that we've got this in the wrong direction, that every child can think and solve problems, and at the core and the foundation of learning should be the invitation to solve problems. And that we want to, and by the way, I'll come back to this in a moment to expand on some of these thoughts, but I want to suggest to you in general that, see, I think we need to move from traditional, I think schools have for too long been knowledge hierarchies. Places where the textbook holds some kind of truth. Would you agree? Kids don't question the text. If it's in the text, it must be true. I remember being in a classroom, student asked a question, I said, okay, but how do you know that? Well, it's in the textbook. I said, yeah, but how do you know the textbook's true? Well, you wrote it. I said, yeah, but I don't have time to research this stuff. I just made that up. The kids got really stressed. I said, I'm joking, right? But you can't assume because it appeared in a text, it's true. How many of the kids today, well, I found online it must be true. Because they're being raised in a situation where there's a hierarchical sense of that I come in as your teacher, I know the truth, and I impart that to you. How many times do we show a film in class with a worksheet, and you watch the film to simply pull information out of it as opposed to question the film? See, I want kids to have to wonder, let's pull apart an inconvenient truth to decide how solid is that. Let's watch Jurassic Park and decide, that's a great film. Jurassic Park's a wonderful film to watch. Is there any good science in it? That's what I want kids to think about. Because there's a lot of flaws, am I right? Like not a single Jurassic dinosaur in the whole movie. Right? So, I mean, there are problems with the science. Doesn't negate it as a great film, but I need kids to watch through this lens. So I want to move from this traditional hierarchy. Whoops. That's not where I was jumping to. I want to see us move to a knowledge network where at the core of learning are provocative questions or invitations for kids to solve problems. And I want you to note my arrows go in multiple directions here because in an inquiring classroom, it's a much more organic flow. I may put out a provocative question and you might reflect on what you already know and then share that. Or maybe you'll reflect and then do some investigation. Or maybe you'll start by sharing and then construct based on, investigate and make some revisions. That it's a much more organic flow than that kind of traditional, I'm going to impart content to you and then I'll work on your understanding. When we get to the top, I'll invite you to create something. We want to start with that provocative core. And what I just love that goes with this, there's a book about a year and a half ago that David Weinberg put out. The book's called Too Big to Know, and his central premise in his book is that in the world today, there's just so much information on the line that no one person can know all the information. So I loved his subtitle, that the smartest person in the room is the room. And just that notion that if you have a complex problem, and underlying much of this design week and the challenge is the world ahead, you'll notice much of the language. We don't know what jobs kids will be doing down there. We don't know what problems are coming. There are complex issues out there. Well, if we want to solve these issues, putting our heads together is a far more powerful way than isolating ourselves. So I love this notion. And by the way, when you read the book, the smartest person in the room, that room could be a virtual room. Like how do we get kids communicating with kids, not just within my classroom, but across your state, across your country, internationally, so we can learn from each other. So I love that notion that we think about that collaborative and critical classroom. So what I want to do is, and I notice this is the background many of you come from, a design thinking background where we empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test, and we loop back. I want to explore, so what happens if we were to marry together critical thinking, that I want to bring some pieces to that and add that in the design thinking, that we ensure that design thinking at all phases is at its foundation, at its core, a critical thinking exercise for kids. So this is what I want to play with, and then I want to add the creativity piece in next. Hopefully my time will let me get there. So let's first of all be clear on, what is critical thinking, because there's lots of, it's one of these terms that I rarely meet an educator who doesn't want their kids thinking critically. Like teachers don't say, well, I don't want my kids thinking. We want our kids thinking. But defining critical thinking is often inconsistent. By the way, how many of the students you teach think that critical thinking is to be critical? So that's the wrong route. They think that critical thinking is to criticize. So if I said, write a critical review of a play you saw recently, that doesn't mean point out the shortcomings or flaws in the play. That's the wrong understanding. Critical thinking is not to be critical or to criticize. It actually means to assess or judge, okay? To render an assessment or a judgment. And the key thing is it's rendering that assessment or that judgment in light of criteria. Critical thinking actually comes from the Greek meaning criteria. All critical thinking is criterial thinking. Okay? It's making thoughtful decisions in light of criteria. Let me show you. How many of you have seen the movie Pulp Fiction? Did you like it? Okay. I didn't like it. I found the violence disturbing. But I think it was a brilliant film. So I want to show you a distinction there. As a critical thinker, I should be able to say, not my taste, but I recognize the brilliance behind that. Okay? As an art teacher, can you tell me an artist whose work you would not hang in your home, but you think they're brilliant? Who would come to mind?
Oh, maybe Keith Haring.
Okay? Tell me about it. I don't...
Keith Haring, and he's still alive today. He's one of the still alive, but he's the one that did a billboard. He went out and he graffiti a billboard, got arrested for it, got put in jail, and then New York hired him to do some.
Okay. I think about Francis Bacon, for example. You know, the carcass from 1920? I wouldn't want that in my... Or Duchamp's urinal. You know, do I want... You know, Duchamp turns a urinal upside down and signs it, calls it art. Not sure I want that at my front door, right? But I can recognize the brilliance behind this art. It's not my taste. So we need to help kids move from what makes... How many kids you teach? If I said, what makes good music, would it be the music they like? Like if I like it, it's good. If I don't like it, it's bad. See, I need kids to be able to say, what's at the core of what makes great? In graphic design, I can not like that, but go, that really works for the audience it's intended. I wouldn't use it, right? So getting kids to start to embrace, how do we make thoughtful decisions using criteria to guide us in our decision making? Let me give you a quick example. If I said to you, your car is getting kind of old, and you want to replace it, you can have any one of these cars. There's probably a difference between the car you'd love to have and the car you're going to buy. Can I ask, what car would you can have any one of them, which one do you take?
Truck.
You want the truck, okay? Anyone take a different vehicle? You do. So, I like that part. What's that?
I'm going to sell it after I buy it.
So you're going to, which one are you taking?
The most expensive.
You're taking the most expensive and selling it. I like that. That's a thank you. Okay. Interesting. By the way, note, as you look up there, you can be guided by either, oh, I love that car, or I need a vehicle that is practical for my needs, fits within my budget, and is affordable to run. Okay? That's a critically thoughtful decision. If I looked up there, I live north of Toronto on a bit of acreage, so I have a small truck. If I said, you know, I want to replace my truck, I need something that's practical. We have 3 feet of snow right now, so it's decent in the snow. And I come home with the bottom, you know, the Lamborghini down there, Ferrari, I'm not sure. That's a midlife crisis. You know, you said you wanted something affordable, practical, and so on, and you came home with a sports car, right? Notice the difference. By the way, anyone ever driven a smart car? Well, I flew into Edmonton in northern Alberta. I had a 2-hour drive up the Alaska Highway in the middle of winter. I didn't realize until I got out to the car they rented. They gave me a smart car. The big truck's almost blowing me off the road. I'm like, this must be great in a little city, but it's a sewing machine on wheels. There's no shocks in that thing, I don't think. Man, holy. Like if I were to say, what's your criteria for a sound vehicle to drive the highways of northern Alberta? It would not meet my criteria, I got to tell you. But I want you to know what we want to think about is getting children to make thoughtful decisions. This is the framework, and this is what Doris was alluding to in her opening comments, but this is the framework that we work with in the Critical Thinking Consortium. The key fronts. How do we nurture a community of thinkers? How do you create the classroom climate where thinking is encouraged and modeled and supported? By the way, if I don't have a safe classroom, you'll never have a true community of thinkers. Because if you throw out an idea and someone else says, well, that seems stupid, I don't want to do that next time. By the way, I always would say to people, I think Harry Potter is a good example of not creating a community of thinkers. Who answers all the questions? Hermione. And what do the other kids do? They wait for Hermione to answer. Would you agree? Look, we all know the smart kid in the class, and the teacher's just going to take their answers. If we keep our mouth shut and our head down, we don't have to do too much thinking in here. Right? You're not creating a community of thinkers if I let 2 or 3 kids dominate the questioning. So in my class, if you answered, I'd go, that's a really interesting question. Who has another thought? You may have noticed earlier, I want to field 2 or 3 responses. I'm not interested in the right response. I'm interested in some thoughtful responses. I'd like to see someone have a view that disagrees with that. Could someone add to that? Right? So how do we build that community? What you're working with, the design challenges, We think everything we do with kids in our classrooms can invite them to think critically. We call them critical challenges. How do I tweak whatever task I'm giving kids so it moves it from something they can look up, they can Google or recall, to a judgment they have to make? I'm going to show you some examples in a moment, but what's the little tweak we could make to make that a critical thinking task? Now, the next piece I want to stress are the 5 intellectual tools, because this is my biggest concern. If you do those first 2, you'll create the climate for thinking, you'll create opportunities for thinking. But if you don't build the intellectual tools, you don't help children do the thinking. And in fact, you won't advance thinking very far. You'll notice one of the ones I had up there, and your comment earlier about the math that you had learned is absolutely, notice one of our first intellectual tools, if I don't have access to the background knowledge, I can't do the thinking. I can't think deeply about theater design if I don't know anything about it. Right? You can't innovate in a field you know nothing about. That critical thinking and creativity are not separated from knowing the content. Kids need to know. The question is, how do I help them learn it? How do I help them access that information? I don't know what's happening here, but I can tell you in some areas in Canada, our math scores are dropping because I think we've swung too far to kids will simply muck about and they'll stumble on math. You know, my wife's always saying, no, you don't stumble on complex math. We need to build some background so children can engage in the inquiry. The second pillar of all critical thinking is criteria for judgment. If I have no criteria, how do I decide if that's a good idea? How do I decide if that's sound or not? I might have a cool idea, but is it a good idea? Is it feasible? Does it serve the purpose? So what criteria? When the children are working today, yeah, thank you.
Would you work mainly on the background knowledge first or simultaneously? Because the challenge for me is, for example, I teach German, so I mean there has to be some sort of base vocabulary to even handle debates and such.
Absolutely.
And so where do you start?
So the question for me is going to be, how can I build background knowledge in a way that still engages children in thinking? So for example, concept attainment is presenting yes-no examples. If I want to build some language proficiency, I might be saying, well, these are all yes examples of a language concept. These are no examples. Can you figure out what my concept, what do these share in common? So I'm going to build their background. So what we want to do is make sure that that background knowledge building piece is not sit tight for 3 days while I transmit, but how do I engage you in thinking while learning the background? So yes, I have to build the background. How do I do it in a way that engages thinking? And we can explore some of those pieces. But by the way, my challenge would still come first. Now you guys, to do that, what do you need to know to be able to get there? So if you're going to write a piece for me, write it. And if it's mostly in English right now, fine. But by the end, it has to be in German. How are we going to change it? So I would present the challenge first to give it context. I would build their background. Okay? And I'm going to show you a model of that in a moment. So the 2 key things, do kids have the sufficient background? Have we identified some criteria for them? Do they understand the critical thinking vocabulary? I want to be careful on this. Be careful you don't confuse that with the background knowledge. So if we're learning Pythagorean theorem, that's background knowledge. If I ask what can be inferred from this, that's critical thinking vocabulary. If a child doesn't know what you mean by an inference, they can't do your task. If you don't know what it means to analyze and evaluate, by the way, the number of high school teachers will tell me their students really don't know when the question says evaluate and analyze the following passage. They don't really know what that means. Then they're just taking a shot at getting it right. So sometimes it's a matter of slowing down and saying, well, what do we mean when we ask this question? What are the thinking strategies we can use? I'll try to show you a few of these that would help kids do that thinking. And Doris mentioned the habits of mind. Good critical thinkers, by the way, one of the habits that we work with, and we have 19 habits we work with, is empathy. I was fascinated to learn when I started looking at design thinking that the starting point in all design thinking is empathy. You can't design without empathizing for the client. You have to get inside the head of what that client needs. And I thought, interesting, that the core of design learning is empathy. Attention to detail, open-mindedness, flexible-minded, curiosity. These are habits of good thinkers. I want to just illustrate for a moment, very, very briefly, why it's so important that we get the critical thinking vocabulary right. Let me show you Sheldon when he's asked to guess. So the reason I love that clip is, you see, if we use terms like guess with kids, they can say anything they want. You asked Sheldon to guess, and he guessed. Now, I think that was a great guess, by the way. Right? I can't give you criteria for a sound guess. Okay? You ask me to guess. So if we ask young children, if we read a story and we stop and say, guess what's going to happen next? I could have aliens come down and abduct all the characters and put in the characters I want. You told me to guess. You know? How many jelly beans are in my jar? 1 million, 1,000, 10, 5. You said guess. What do I really want if I ask how many jelly beans are in my jar? What am I asking for?
I think an estimate.
You're asking for an estimate. If I'm reading a story and I pause and I say, what's going to happen next? What am I asking for? I'm asking for a prediction. We need to be clear with kids. By the way, I can give you criteria for a sound prediction. You know, a sound prediction pays attention to the clues in the story so far and makes sense with the story. I could say to a child, that's a really sound prediction, or could you explain to me how you arrived at that? I can't do that with a guess. So part of this is me just trying to illustrate, you know, part of our work is to make sure when we ask kids questions, do they understand the question that we're asking them? Let me just move a little bit to, I'm going to show you, we tend to sort questions into 3 types, and I'll just very quickly set this up. What I would call a type 1 question would be factual recall. It's just locating. I can retrieve it. I could Google this. You told me yesterday. We brainstormed. Typically, there's no decision to be made. Okay? There's no criteria to apply. I just asked you, can you remember something? What we would call a column 2 or a type 2 question is a preference. It's how I feel about something. I like this. Okay? Notice I might ask you, did you like a film? And you might say yes. That's not the same question as asking you to assess its quality. Okay? Notice earlier I asked, did you like Pulp Fiction? And you said yes, and I said I didn't. That's a preference. Yet I recognize its brilliance. That's a judgment. Okay, so what I want you to see is what we call a column 2 question. And often I think we sometimes ask kids questions that are really inviting a preference response, and then we make them defend it. It's hard to defend a preference. If I said to you, I'd like to pour you a glass of wine, would you like red or white? That's a preference question. Now, by the way, I get that you could say, well, reds give me a migraine, and you're serving fish tonight, so I think white would go better with fish. I'm just standing with the wine saying, can I just pour you a bloody glass of wine? I don't need your rationale. I've asked you a preference question. It is possible you could give me a critically thoughtful response. I just don't need one right now. Does that make sense? There are times I just want to know how you feel. By the way, you want all 3 types of questions in your classroom. Okay? I'm not suggesting we don't want all of these. It's that the type 3 questions are the ones that drive the inquiry. They're what really drives design learning. What's the problem I have to solve? Once I know that, by the way, I need to go gather information. So it's kind of going back to your point that I have a provocative issue for you. You can't answer it if I don't ask some type 1 questions. But they're in the service of helping me answer the type 3 questions. I want type 2 questions. I want to know what kids are interested in, what they like and enjoy. But I also need to understand that's not an analytical question. That's not a thinking question. So of course I would in art, what's your kind of visceral, do you enjoy this painting? Can you tell me what makes it a powerful painting is a different question, right? So we want all 3 types of questions. By the way, if any of these documents, Doris, we could always arrange a way to send some of these documents, because I know you're, and many of them are Word documents, so they're easy to send, so just let me know. I want to have you do a little bit of practice. So I said type 1 questions are content recall, they're retrieval, but there's no decision. 2 is how I feel. 3 is making a judgment in light of criteria. Where would you put this question? Is that a 1, 2, or a 3? Your 2 criteria to use. Is there a judgment required? Could I apply criteria? Where would you put this? I got 1, I got 1 and 2. Any other thoughts? Yeah. Why a 3? Okay. Is there a judgment there? Is there a judgment?
I'd say definitely a 3, because you would have to know types of wood in order to answer the question appropriately.
I think
Okay.
about the use of the wood, how are you using it, what kind of thing?
Okay. And if it's a butcher's block, it can't be too porous. It has to, there's certain things. So I'd have to know the criteria for a good butcher's block. I'd have to have that, gather some background so I'd make a judgment. By the way, notice it's not what's your favorite kind of wood, which would be a 2. It's which wood would work best in this context. Okay? So remember what we ask ourselves, am I being asked to make a judgment? Could I apply criteria? Notice that one, where would you put that? That's a 2. What's your favorite? I really like working with this, okay? What about this one? 1, 2, or 3? Where would you put that? Why a 3?
Well, you could design criteria that defines what superb sound is and what they define aesthetically appealing. Because both of those are sort of twos.
Yep.
But if you created criteria that define those, you could compare what you did, your design, against those criteria.
Yeah, so notice not just create some headsets, right? And it's not design headsets you think are cool. It is design headsets that meet some things. And then we could, as you're saying, we can unpack, well, what does it mean to have superb sound? What does that mean to be? But we have given kids some parameters. It's not just throw together a set of, but there's some guiding ideas here. So you'll notice sometimes they're not questions. So I probably should change my title, because sometimes they might be tasks.
2.
Is there a joke? Why 3? See, this, we have to be careful. I'm not asking you what's the roadster you like best. I'm asking you best ever made. Now, by the way, if the child doesn't come up with some criteria that makes a good roadster, so notice if I said, well, I love this car, so that's what I'm arguing for, then it's a 2. If they say, well, by definition, an excellent roadster should meet these criteria, you see how that becomes a 3. So we have to be careful. How are kids responding to this? My favorite, what's the best movie ever made? If you tell me your favorite film, it's a 2 response. If you stop and think what makes a great film and you line it up, it becomes a 3 response. So the key here, are you making a judgment? Are you applying some criteria for that judgment?
Well, I guess my
Yes.
question when I look at this is that those words best, and I'm community college and then architect historian and back into the community college.
Yeah.
So, but like, are those questions people say to kids, the best? Because I would think your whole life you're trying to figure out what's the best based on criteria. But I guess, and that's the only reason, you're just trying to get us to try to figure out which kind of question they are. When someone has to anyone who's done a lot of things would have total fear and be incapacitated on the idea of the best, wouldn't they? No.
I don't think so, but I heard a couple of things in your question, so I'm just trying to pull them out. I think at one point you asked, I think, don't we ask this all the time of students? Did I catch that right?
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
Ask the students the best of anything? No.
It implies there's a right answer or wrong answer.
Right.
And so therefore you're
That's
shutting
not
down the
true,
door.
though. You could have the best solution that works for solving the problem in this context, but then there's the best solution for in this context.
So by the way, this is an important conversation here. Best will be subjective if I don't unpack it with criteria.
Right, yeah,
Right?
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's probably because these are so simple to.
Yes, and if
Me already.
yeah, and the reason it scares is if I throw that out to kids just like that and that's it, first of all, often you're going to get a yes, no, or a single word response, or a preference response. So if you don't say, well, let's think about what makes the best for this situation, then you're not going to get a thoughtful response. So there is a scaffolding that needs to happen. You're going to get a very subjective response. And by the way, our goal in education should be getting kids to pause and think, how would I make that decision? What's going to guide my decision in this?
Well, I do a lot of math tutoring, and it's really funny because I absolutely think kids know that because I work a lot with rational numbers, okay? And, kids hate fractions, but they like decimals a little better. They feel better about their ability to compute. And if you said to the kids, okay, can you solve this bet? Which is your best way of solving this problem? Every single one of them will go, I hate fractions, but I can do it with decimals, or I get fractions a lot better because I understand how that conceptually works. I think they totally know I'm better at this, therefore that's my best strategy.
So it's then the best is really subjective. But it's being applied to them
Yeah.
specifically.
Well, but they need to pause and say, well, what am I going to use to determine best? If they have no criteria. Last June I was asked, I got a call when I worked with a school north of Paris in June for a week. By the way, that wasn't a long pause for me to think about the answer. Will you come to Paris for a week in June? Yes. So I worked with this school in Maison Lafitte. And a very strong group of students. It's a very expensive school. It's one of the top 10 in the world in terms of cost. But I got an email from one of the history teachers who said, and his kids were always strong, But he said, you know, after the work you're doing around building in the criteria, I've noticed my students' answers are much deeper, much more thoughtful, much better argued, because instead of assembling evidence that's more, they've now begun to organize it around central ideas. The criteria helps guide their thinking. I think over time we're seeing that getting children, let me give you a quick example from a very young, you know, we ask kids about community. Well, we would say to children, a community has to meet 2 criteria. A community is people interacting and people helping meet each other's needs. Then we show them a picture. Is this a community? Children can say, well, yes, they're helping buy dinner for and they're interacting with it. And you get a much richer conversation than a community where people are together. So we're trying to use the criteria to take kids deeper and get past that. I'll show you some examples. We'll move this into a bit more of a concrete. But in essence, we have found that there are 6 ways that you engage children in critical thinking, that there are essentially 6 ways. All of these are going to play out in the design challenge. Decode the puzzle. When you decode the puzzle, do I understand the problem? Can I understand the issue here? When I look at a painting, can I figure out what the artist was trying to communicate? When I read a story, can I figure out the theme in the story? So when we decode, we're taking information, we're making sense of it. When I critique, notice if I said to you, you know, would this kind of wood make a good butcher's block? That would have been a critique the piece. You give me one of something. If you saw a film, the Oscars are tomorrow night, you know, if I said, you know, should this film make the shortlist, you'd be doing a critique. Tomorrow night, when they say, well, here, what are there, 9 finalists or something? Here are the 9 finalists. Which one should win? Would be a judge the better or best. So sometimes we give kids one of something, and we say, apply our criteria to that one. Sometimes we give them 2 or more. So they're variations of the same idea. We can either judge or critique. When we rework, if we change the audience, when you rework, you know, West Side Story is a giant rework the piece, right? It's take Romeo and Juliet, set it in a modern context, rework it. You know, much of design might be, okay, you've got a different audience now, you've got a different client. Interesting creation, what if you changed your design for this audience? How would you have to alter it? So rework the piece, we take something, in light of new specs, we rework it. Design to specs, specifications, given, by the way, this, when I said at the beginning, design learning should be in every subject, writing an essay is a design to specs. What makes it sound, writing up your science lab is a design to specs. There are certain criteria that will distinguish high quality from low quality work. Okay? So it doesn't matter if I'm designing something concrete, if I'm writing, creating a work of art, and perform to specs. When the kids have to share their learning, they're performing. By the way, as a teacher, every time you design a lesson, you do a design to specs. Every time you deliver that lesson, you're doing a perform to specs. You'll notice every once in a while I go check my phone to see what time it is. Do I need to speed up? Do I slow down? Do I cut something out? My guess is many of you in classroom situations, you're doing that you're on the go. You're deciding what to cut. You're monitoring your kids. I think they're getting confused. I need to throw in a new example. Right? Perform to specs. By the way, in the arts, in phys ed, anytime it's on the fly thinking that we have kids do. I want to show you an example. I'm going to play you a song by James Blunt called No Bravery. And your challenge is to tell me who is he. So in the song, James Blunt keeps referring to he. Keeps saying he has been here. So I'll pull out the lyrics for you. See if you can tell me who he is. Let's listen to the song. So could you just talk to someone beside you for a moment? I'm asking you to figure out who is he. Just take a minute and share some thoughts. Who is he? I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. What do you know about James Blunt? Anyone know his background, who he is?
Yeah, that's
Who knows? Do you know? You guys know for sure, right? James Blunt. Who is he? No, James Blunt. Who's James Blunt?
An army captain.
Okay.
And he left the army and became a singer.
Okay.
And he's probably straddles the point of being the most loved and the most hated man. Because you love him, hate him.
And tell me where he served.
In Bosnia.
Okay. This song was written when he was serving in Bosnia. Tank commander, I think?
That's right, he's a captain for a tank.
Okay. Does that influence at all? By the way, note what I was just doing is building a little bit of background knowledge. Does that change your answer at all?
Yes, good.
Okay? Some of you may say, no, we were thinking war or something broad anyway. Some of you may say, yes, I think it's Milosevic or an individual, or now that I have a context, it might shift things. Okay? What I'm more interested in is I want you to tell me, and because I want to weave something together here, which of the 6 critical thinking prompts was I just using? When I said I'm going to play you a song and I want you to figure out who he might be, using clues from the song and what you know in general, figure out who he is. What do I just ask you to do? So decode the puzzle. So here's a poem, here's a story, here's a song. Can you come up with a reasonable interpretation of this word decoding? What if my question instead, or in addition, and let me give you this context. Let's imagine, and this is me saying, imagine if design learning was across the curriculum. And I said to kids, here's our challenge. I want us to put together a CD of the 10 most powerful anti-war songs of all time. So your job is to decide which 10 songs make it to our CD. And you'll design, and you have to write the liner notes, not with the songs written this year by this person, but why this makes the cut. Okay, you're going to write the liner notes, you're going to design the CD case, you're going to pick the songs, you're going to create the CD. So we've decoded the song, we have some understanding of what we think it's about. What if I were then to ask students, is No Bravery a powerful song? So they have to now decide, does this make our short list? Which of these 6 prompts am I using? Is No Bravery a powerful song? There is a judgment, but which of my prompts is it? It's a critique. I'm only asking you about one song at this point. Apply criteria for a powerful song, decide if this makes the short list. What if I said, okay, I need you to design, using contemporary images of conflict, design the cover that we will put on the front of our jewel case. Now what am I doing? Design the cover that will go on the front of our jewel case for our CD. Which of my 6 prompts? Doing a design. What if I said, good job on the cover, I'd like you to use images from World War I to create our back image. Now what am I doing? So I've done a design, I'm doing a rework. I'm going to change the time period. Could you now create one for a different time period? I'm going to ask the kids to rework. What if I said to the kids, we have 11 songs in our short list, but we only have room for 10, and the last 2, we have to decide, does John Lennon's Imagine or James Blunt No Bravery make the cut? Which one do I use? I've got 2 left, both powerful, only one gets there. Now we see we're doing a judge the better or best. Here are 2 songs, which one best meets our criteria? And if I said, okay, for tomorrow, we're going to be holding a launch, we're going to hold a CD launch tomorrow, I'd like you to create and present a dance that expresses the key ideas expressed in one of those songs. Now I'm doing a perform to specs. So what I was just trying to show you is that by weaving together the 6 different ways of thinking critically, I can have kids engaged in thinking about, creating, rethinking, performing, throughout that whole process, just working with critical thinking prompts to guide their learning. I'm going to show you, it's your turn to try this out. I'm going to show you Sheldon trying to make a friend. See how many, so remember, I'm just going to give you another quick, remember we can design, critique, judge, okay, rework, decode, decode, perform. I'm going to show you a 2-minute clip, see how many of those 6 prompts you can find in this 2 minutes. Here's Sheldon. So just before we go through the clip, I said earlier about the importance of background knowledge to be able to engage in critical thinking. 2 minutes later in this clip, when they're actually rock climbing, and Kripke turns to Sheldon and says, so Cooper, how are you feeling? And Sheldon said, I feel like an inverse tangent approaching its asymptote. My wife starts to laugh, and I'm sitting there going, I don't get it. Why is that so funny? And Laura said, well, you don't know what an asymptote. And I said, I know, I thought you were just swearing at me, right? And she said, that's a perfect analogy. If you're not, she said, an asymptote is a slope but never reaches top or bottom. Well, Sheldon passes out and he's hanging up there. And she said, what a perfect analogy for kids understanding this concept. So her challenge for her math students was to go find an everyday occurrence that reflects a math concept they were learning and be able to bring it into class and explain why. But I want you to note, if you watch the show, there's a lot of math and science humor there I don't get, that I laugh at, the plot, the slapstick. But there's some humor that just goes right over my head. You know, my wife and daughter, who are more math and science oriented, will laugh at something, and I say, I mean, really interesting humor sometimes eludes you if you don't have the background. Let me walk you through it quick. At the beginning, Sheldon said, I read Stu the Cockatoo, and I distilled its essence. He read Stu the Cockatoo, and he distilled it. What type of prompt is that? He's decoding, right? When kids read a story, they figure out the theme or the idea, they're decoding. He then creates his flow chart. What's that? Having read the story, he creates the flow chart. It could be a rework. He takes a story and reworks it as, or we could see it as a design. So it's a design, but he creates. What's the whole clip about? Which are the prompts? The whole clip's one of those prompts. It's all a performance specs. He's going to walk you through it and see if it works. It's a performance specs, right? What are his friends doing? His friends said, well, let's hear him out. He might be onto something. They're critiquing. Let's see if this actually works. Wolowitz realized he's stuck in an infinite loop. What's he do? He reworks it. So the only one we're missing is the judge the better or best. Where is that? Judge. So when he has to pick the least objectionable alternative, is really an inverted judge the better or best. Which of these is least objectionable? I love that clip because in 2 minutes, 6 ways of thinking critically are demonstrated as they work through this. Now I want to shift gears a little bit, but I wanted to show you, have you do a little bit of this work. How many of you have seen OK Go videos? Okay, I want to show you a little bit. I want to show you a bit of an OK Go video. I want you to see how many of the 6 prompts you can find in this as they created this video, which I just think is a wonderful example for students to look at. So, could you just take a minute? We'll just spend a couple more minutes on this. Whoa, bring up the right piece here. I want to go back to the 6 prompts, if we could, for just a moment. Not just in the clip, but in the design and the preparation for that. How many of those 6 prompts can you imagine being at play as they got ready to shoot that video? So if you just take a moment, how many of the 6 prompts are likely at play either in the creation of or in preparing to create that video? I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to share some thoughts. Okay, so I wanted to show you that just because, as I was saying to a few folks up here, there's another video of OK Go in creating the video. And essentially, they crowdsourced for help. They just threw something out wide and said, we've got an idea, who can help us do it? And they got responses from engineers and designers and all kinds of folks who said, hey, I'm in. And the video is just a group of people in a room kicking around ideas. Oh, I could bring this. Oh, I could design that. I could do that. Keep in mind, this is just a band. These group of musicians said, we have an idea. And they floated out the idea, and people came together to help them. So when we began saying, you know, this whole idea of creative and collaborative and so on, it's a wonderful example of the pulling together in a design process. Now, I want to jump ahead. I'm watching our time. I want to add to our conversation a little bit by picking up on, you know, when we take the design process and we layer in very thoughtful, intentional use of critical thinking, where criteria is being used to guide the intellectual tools are being nurtured. But I want to also add to this conversation, get this to happen for me, right? The creative piece. So what does it look like when we add creativity? And I want to suggest to you that I was speaking in North Carolina a couple of years ago, maybe it was a year ago, at a conference on creativity, and I began by saying that there's no such thing as creative thinking, which tends to get a room full, especially of arts educators, backs up a little bit. And I said, let me be clear in what I'm saying here. If you look at the neuroscience behind creativity, there's not a part of the brain, I mean, that old 80s stuff, you know, right brain, left brain, out, you know, like we know that, you know, great, you know, geniuses, creative geniuses have a stronger corpus callosum that links the brain, so it's the interaction across the hemispheres, it's not the dominance of one. When I said there's no such thing as creative thinking, what I want to say to you is that creativity is a product of good thinking. My fear is that creativity is often seen as this poor second cousin in terms of rigor, that critical thinking has rigor, and creativity is this fluffier piece. I really disagree with that. Creativity is as equally rigorous, as equally important. And I want to say to people, look, it's the same frontal lobes that are at place. If I give you a creative challenge, it's the same part of the brain that's activated to solve that challenge. So we need to move away from this, you know, divine inspiration hits and so on. And by the way, you can teach creativity, you can assess creativity, it has as much rigor. So I've been trying to organize my thinking around this. I'll just touch on these because we don't have a lot of time. If I want to nurture creativity, I have to create opportunities that invite creativity, that invite children to create something of value that's unique and so on, which is what the design challenge does. I'm going to touch on some of those pieces in a moment. I have to guide students in their learning. We'll talk about this. How am I assessing to guide that? Am I allowing them to play? We'll talk what I mean by that. Are we building the intellectual tools? By the way, you cannot be creative if you don't have deep knowledge in the area you're attempting to create. You are not creative about something you know nothing about. So even in the field of creativity, do I know enough about, in your art class, if I know nothing about art or the mediums, I'm probably not going to be able to create like I could. Am I right? Okay. Let me just touch for a moment on BVSR. BVSR stands for Blind Variation Selected Retention. And it's a concept that underlines creativity research. So it plays out like this. Blind variation, one of the key things in creativity is being able to generate lots of ideas for consideration, the fluency in ideas and the flexibility. To do that, you actually want to lower cognitive control. If we're throwing out ideas, but we're constrained by, but that's probably not going to work, or I'm not sure if we'll be allowed to do that, you've put filters in place. The more filters are in place, the less fluid, the less flexible your thinking is going to be. So there's a point in the creativity process that I need to lower cognitive filters, right? That even if I say to a student, I want you to design something for your family's use, you've put a filter in place. Because now I'm going, well, that wouldn't work for my family. You want to lower cognitive control to get all the ideas on the table you can. So that's the BV, blind variation. But selective retention, okay, we've got we've got ideas on the table, great. Which of these are worth pursuing, which do we want to let go of? That's the selective retention. And by the way, you can't do the selective retention without critical thinking because you need criteria now to decide, well, which of those are feasible, useful, will address the issue that I had. So blind variation, selective retention. And then have we created the climate, the routines in our classes? And one of the things that I think we need to do better in education generally, in my view, is embrace failure. I don't think we embrace enough failure. I think it's essential to learning. And at most, I think the structure of schools doesn't make it safe for me to fail. Okay? I'm going to try to address that briefly and touch on a couple of things around creativity before we wrap up. First of all, just say, in terms of creating opportunities, what I love about your design challenge is it grounds it in purpose, that creativity is not frivolous. It's not something that I just got struck by an idea for no apparent reason. Creativity, by its very definition, is purposeful reimagining of the possible. It's exploring what might be possible. So we need to create opportunities that are of value for students to engage with creativity. And we also have to create opportunities for them to revise, to muck about, to speculate. And I'll show you the structure I want to talk about just for a moment with that. And kids need a chance to play. I'm going to talk to you about a cascading curriculum idea. I'll unpack a bit of this for you, but kids need time to try stuff out and let it not work and figure out why it's not working. I think you were just saying to me the other day, I'm sorry, I forget your name. Yes? Marsha. You were saying the other day your kids, something with their electrical input wasn't working?
We didn't have any electrical.
And they were going, oh, we have a problem?
Well, yeah, because it's a system.
Yeah.
Have inputs and outputs.
And so they're trying to figure this out. Kids have to be allowed to play with something, and it doesn't work. Let me show you very quickly what but let me put it in this context. Who plays Angry Birds? Anyone here play Angry Birds? Just a few, okay. By the way, I think it's starting to give way now to Candy Crush and some other things. All right, at its peak, I did a little research on this. Angry Birds is being played 200 million hours a year around the world. 200 million hours a year. That's the equivalent of 16 years every day invested in this game. That intrigued me. Yeah. Why? Why are people willing to invest so much time? And my wife said to me one day, I don't know why you'd waste so much time on that stupid game. I set my iPad down, I came back, she said, sorry, I moved you up 2 levels. That was a stupid game. Yeah, it's kind of addictive, you know. Well, let me show you. Again, I'm not saying we should all play Angry Birds in our classrooms, but a year ago I was in Madrid speaking at a conference, and the keynote speaker before my keynote was talking about motivation and sustained attention in kids. And she was connecting that sustained attention connects to the pleasure center of the brain. You pay attention to me this morning if I'm seeing something that's interesting, relevant, useful to you. If not, chances are you're drifting off, you're thinking about other things. If I'm sitting in your classroom, is there relevance? Am I interested? Do I see purpose to this? If I can't connect it to something of value, of interest, or use to me, it's harder to pay attention over time. Dopamine, by the way, is the neurotransmitter that gives you that sense of satisfaction that you get. Okay? Coffee is a natural dopamine booster. You'll notice coffee commercials, when someone takes a sip of coffee, they have a contented look on their face. Their brain's got a shot of dopamine. Chocolate is a natural dopamine booster. Anyone crave chocolate partway through the day? Your brain's craving a dopamine boost. But what I found fascinating is another major source of dopamine is being successful at achieving a challenge. Okay? By the way, the two have to go together. If you give me a challenge that's way beyond what I'm capable of, you give me 30 math questions and I get the first 10 wrong, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing, you've challenged me, but I'm not getting a dopamine rush from repeated failure. You give me a task that's too easy, I'll be successful. I don't get a dopamine rush by reading through some material and pulling words out and filling in a worksheet. I can do it, I'm just not being challenged. When you challenge me at an appropriate level, you've seen kids on skateboards wipe out, get up, try it again, because they're getting a dopamine rush. I almost landed that, I can do this. When you give kids a challenge, when they come in here this afternoon and you give them a challenge, they go, the brain's getting a dopamine boost, and they're starting to explore, and if they're successful, they get that aha stuff. What the research is showing is that if kids are going to get that dopamine boost, they need to be successful a minimum of 20% of the time. If you've played things like Angry Birds, or has anyone played 4 Pictures in a Word? Anyone know that one? You play these games, you know that, would you agree, you have a pretty good shot at knocking out some of those pigs early on, all right? It is intentionally designed to allow you to be successful early on and then increase the challenge as you move along, okay? I've been working on a project with a woman who's developing a gaming approach to language acquisition. So if you want to learn Spanish, you will learn it immersed in a gaming environment where you get immediate feedback, you can reset the game and so on. And I thought it makes a lot of sense, actually. I'm at a meeting. By the way, I don't speak another language and I don't play a lot of games. So I'm at a meeting of a room filled with linguists and game designers. And I made my comment I made to you earlier about Bloom's taxonomy. A gaming expert jumped in right away and she said, every gamer in the world would agree with your comment. Tell me, those of you, how many of you play video games? Anyone here play video games? You know kids who play video games? How many of them read the manual first? They start playing the game. When they get stuck, am I right? If you get stuck, you'll go do some research, you'll figure it out. When's the last time you downloaded an app to your phone and read the instructions before you started using it? We live in an immersive world where you jump into the issue and you learn through the experience. You don't learn first. And the video game people said, if video games made kids read the manual before they were allowed to play, they'd go out of business. Yet I would argue in most school settings, we make kids do the learning first before we give them the interesting tasks. If schools were video games, we'd be out of business, right? So I want you to show you, I want you to think about this. So I've started to use the term just launch the birds. Here's my challenge to you. And I think this is what you're already doing. So I think this aligns up. I think we need to shift our thinking from our tasks being proof you've learned, because I think often in schools, notice our language, we have culminating tasks or summative tasks. The task too often lies at the end. I will first teach you stuff. And when I've taught you enough stuff, you will complete my task that will provide proof that you've learned what you're supposed to learn. I want to suggest you return that upside down and make your task the invitation to do the learning. Make the task the driver, not the end. And I was saying earlier to Marcia, I think teachers do much more. I think we've had a shift in our conversation from teachers to sage on the stage, but we're drifting to guide on the side or facilitator. Well, I want to suggest you do much more than facilitate. I think you choreograph. So the term I've been using lately, I think teachers are choreographers. You choreograph the learning experiences kids need to be successful. That means sometimes I need to step in and do a short lecture. Sometimes I need to provide this experience. By the way, as a choreographer, sometimes I choreograph whole group, sometimes I choreograph small group, and sometimes I choreograph a solo. What does each child need that's going to help them move along? But I think we put the task up front, I mean, to me, hopefully many of you are saying, that is design. The task drives the learning, and you figure out what you need to learn. I want to show you just very quickly a couple of examples. I'm just going to jump by this. This is what I'm calling a cascading curriculum, where my task comes first. I'll give you a very quick couple examples to start. My daughter came home in physics, from her physics class in 11th grade, and she said, anyone here have a physics background? Because I don't, so she can help me. Well, here was her task. She had to explain what causes a curveball to curve, and why is it hard to hit. So in baseball, why does a curveball curve, and why is it hard to hit? Use what you know about Newton's laws of motion to explain this. That's a pretty good question. That's a tough question for her. I called up her teacher and I said, do you mind if I come in and meet with you? I love from a critical thinking lens, I love your question. We started chatting and I said to him, as we were talking, I said, but it's interesting that your question came at the end of your unit. What if we asked it first? What if we said to the kids the very first day, speculate, wonder, jot down a thought, put down an idea? What if your question drove the learning, and every time you taught a lesson, she got to go back and revise, add to, change her answer? I said, tell me what my daughter has to understand to answer that question. He said, remember, Marsha, earlier you were saying about some key concepts? I said, tell me what my daughter will need to understand to answer your question. He said, here are the 4 big concepts. She has to understand acceleration due to gravity. And he went through here the 4 big things. I said, good. Those were my larger boxes. I said, tell me how you would help my daughter understand acceleration due to gravity. He said, well, I do this lab, I do this lesson. We basically in an hour back mapped his unit. So what launched was an invitation for her to speculate and then work through identifying those core concepts, but she would get to repeatedly revisit. I'm going to show you, and I can back up in a moment, but I'm watching my time. I want to show you a grade 2 example. We were working on growth and change in animals. Let me show you. This is the cascade that we developed for the grade 2 class. Our question was, how can we best use our understanding of animals to help them live healthy lives? Okay, that was their science curriculum. They were to design a zoo enclosure for a particular animal that would give that animal a place to grow and be healthy in. I want you to note, I was asked to do the introductory lesson for this unit. So 5 minutes into the unit, I've said to the kids, okay, you guys get the giraffes, and you guys get the elephants, and you guys get the monkeys, you guys get the dolphins. Each group were given an animal, and I asked them, okay, start designing now. Each child was given a little Hilroy book. Can you hold up what you're drawing in right there? That's perfect. They're each given a book like this. We called it their thought book, and we said, draw your enclosure right now, go. I want you to know, no front-end loading of content, draw it, go. Then, in the weeks ahead, here are 4 lines of inquiry we explored. What do they need to meet their physical needs? How will they get their exercise? What food will they need? How do we need to care for them? D of L means demonstration of learning. Each of my focus inquiries had a small demonstration of learning, an assessment task, but those 4 demonstrations would be used to pull together the end piece they needed. Does that make sense? There are 4 smaller assessments that are all building blocks that would help. I could imagine in a set design, here are 4 things you're going to need to consider. We're going to work on each one. You're going to pull them together. We then created the supporting lessons that we will explore each of the lines. I just want to quickly show you the little boy that was asked to design the monkey's cage. That's what he drew the first day. He drew the monkey's cage. You can see the little banana there, a little tire to swing on. That's his drawing 10 minutes in to the unit. We then began to teach concepts they needed to know and so on. A couple of days later, the same little boy was asked to go back to his thought book. What would you draw now? What was beautiful was, as he learned more and more, I need to add a fence to keep people safe. Where will he get water? Remember, this book is his muck-about place, his change his mind, his aha moments. This is meant to be your fail-forward place. I drew this at the first, but then I changed, I went back a month later to visit these students. They all had finished their beautiful models. Every child I went to first wanted to show me their thought book. They all wanted to walk me through their thinking. Notice we talk about design thinking. I thought about this first, but when we learned this, I added it. And then I added this piece, and then we learned about this, and I added this piece. And I want you to, the teacher said, go look at that boy's over there. His end product's not that good, but his thought book is brilliant. And I thought, how much rich thinking might go on. If I take a risk and my product isn't exactly what you wanted, but you see rich thinking over here, what mark should that child get? See, I would say, you know what, I'm giving that child an A. He should have all kinds of scientific understanding. But if I'm going to encourage risk taking, isn't it okay that sometimes the risk but you demonstrate it? By the way, I want to just quickly show you, and I can share, I won't pull these up right now, but I have dozens of these. This is a high school computer one where students are designing a computer game. The teacher walks them through what are the 4 big concepts you'll need to know in terms of game design and how you're going to test your game. But the game design comes first if you were to create that. Set design. Someone the other day in art was saying, I want students to create a painting showing movement. And I said, well, why not let the kids do their sketch right off the bat? And every time they learn something in your art class, they're thinking about, now, how would you change? What would you do? Why wait till the end? Now that I've taught you all the art, create your painting, why not let them begin in their sketchbook? Oh, I could add this to it. I could add that to it. I could imagine your graphic design, your interior design. If that's your challenge, what did you do today? What did you do 3 days later? Every day you come to my class, you learn something new that you're going to feed into it. Let me just, I want students to understand, by the way, that this idea of using a thought book is probably not new to many of you. Many of you carry around, there's sketchbooks people carry around. My watermark that you see up there is from Da Vinci. When Spielberg creates storyboards, that's a thought book. He's mucking about, it starts vague, he changes his mind, he adds details. There's J.K. Rowling sketching out the Harry Potter series, changing her mind, moving things around. It's messy. Thinking is meant to be messy. I want to create a space for kids to be able to fail and go, okay, I got a better idea now. I love Newton's division of a monochord. Drawing, scribbling, might notice here, you actually can't spell parallel, right? It's okay, this is your thinking place. Be messy, and I think it gives us tons of evidence. So let me just finish by saying, let me give you one last piece. See, I think thought books, for me, as an assessment tool, and again, I'm saying this, I want you to note, if I was in an English class and children were to write a short story, I'd do the same thing. Start sketching out your short story right now. As I teach you about more and more literary devices, as we read other stories, you're going to take ideas and you're going to expand and add to and change your story. I wouldn't teach them all about short stories and say, now that we're done, write your own. I'd start with a kernel of an idea and help them grow their idea. I would start with the kernel of the idea in almost anything and say, okay, now let's explore together. And as we get new ideas, our ideas will emerge. And just from an assessment lens, as a teacher, it's assessment as learning, because every day in my class, you're invited to take what you would have said yesterday and decide, is that a sound answer? Do you need to add to that answer? Do you want to change your answer? Kids are the ones continually reflecting on their answer. The assessment for learning. I want you to know when that little boy drew that initial picture, it gave me a baseline. I know what he knows, what he doesn't know. I know what I need to show up. I know how to choreograph his learning. Okay? It gives me a baseline. And in an ongoing way, every day I come by, I take a look at my child's thought books, 2 or 3 maybe a day. I flip through, I see where they're going. I see where the gaps are. I see the misconceptions. I know when I need to pull a small group together. If I'm seeing a common misconception, I'm going to do a whole class. It helps inform my instruction. And lastly, I already mentioned this, it triangulates my assessment data, because I'm no longer just basing my marks on your end product. I want to see the thinking process you went through so I can make a sound assessment. By the way, I just want to stress, I would never personally mark a thought book because I think it'll destroy its purpose. I will use it to inform the judgments I make about the students overall. And if you hand in a great end product and a weak thought book, I'll give you the mark. I'm simply using it to make sure I have all the evidence I can about the thinking you've gone through. So I've got to stop at that point. Happy to share whatever we could on this. I think that I have to tell you, much of what I'm doing around cascading curriculum and thought books has been inspired by design learning, the work that you already do. It's just me saying, can we not take that across the curriculum and make it just a design learning? Start with the problem and invite kids in. And by the way, to me, it's taking design down planning we've been doing for 20 years and making it design down teaching, letting kids in on the secret, putting the task up front so that they know every day why I'm teaching this lesson. I actually visually put up my cascade so kids say, why are we learning this? Oh, because it's going to help you do that, which is going to help you do that. That there should never be a surprise. And if I can't fit it in the cascade, I probably didn't need it. If it's not helping me get at those rich, big ideas that you identified at the beginning, do I really need this lesson? Could I cut this lesson? I've got to stop there because you've got so much to do today. I hope there were bits and pieces that were useful, and if anything was, I mean, I can make anything available that you want. Just let us know, and Doris and I will sort out how we would get this to you. And I look forward to interacting with the rest of the day of this as we move forward. Thanks so much.